I sort of look like a lost boy. If a lost boy was a 30-something plant hoarder. Feels accurate. Roasted. Hello, fellow plant people, and welcome back to my channel. If you are brand new here, my name is Jen, and I go by The Leafy Geek here and also on Instagram, but I want to say a big welcome back to those of you who are returning. Also, a big thank you to both my long-term subscribers and my new subscribers, because all of you have helped me reach my benchmark, my goal of 500 subscribers on this channel. So thank you so much. I love that you are here, and we talk about plant and gardening things. So welcome. And let's get into this video. I promised a year-end Hoya favorites kind of review, and I tried to film it, and the footage got deleted. I was about halfway through it. I got discouraged. The holidays hit. Things just kind of went down, and then I was on vacation all last week, so I just took a big old break, and I really didn't tell anybody. But yet, you came, you watched videos, you subscribed to my channel, and somehow I hit that 500-person benchmark. Just wanted to put that out there that I owed you a Hoya video, and tonight you're getting a Hoya video. So I wanted to share with you my top 10 Hoyas in my collection of 2021. So there are a few criteria that I used when I was selecting the plants that are on this list. These plants fall into maybe more than one of these categories, but they were kind of they were the main things that I considered and took into account while I was creating this list of 10 Hoyas. One consideration was ease of care. Is it easy for me to care for the plant? Can I neglect it for a while and it'll be fine and I don't really have to worry about it? Does it just keep going and going and going no matter what I throw at it? Another consideration that I took into account was, did it grow for me at all this year? Did it grow a lot, specifically? And bonus, did it bloom? So I kind of looked at the growth habits of my Hoyas and whether or not I remembered or recalled any flowers on any of them. And then the third category that I used for consideration was basically its tenacity. Did it, at any point over the past year, memorably rebound after being on the brink of death? I should say there's one more category too, and it's just generally speaking, does it look cool? Is it a cool looking Hoya? And that's kind of in addition to any of the previous three considerations that I just mentioned. So those were my metrics, and now I'm going to show you some Hoyas. I'll also just put out there that these aren't ranked in any particular order. I did kind of group them together by like the category that I used to evaluate them and what they fell into, but there's no number 1, number 2, number 3, etc. So this guy is my Hoya sp, or species, Kalimantan. And this plant is a dynamite plant. Kind of got to lean back here a little bit to get it in the full frame. I've owned this plant since April 2021, so it's fairly new to my collection, but it was a whole lot smaller when I got it. It's a very, very fast grower in my experience, and it has put out some of the largest leaves of any Hoya in my collection, and they're beautiful. As you can see, they're really strongly veinated here with those dark veins. And so this particular species of Hoya originates on the island of Borneo. That is the Kalimantan region of Borneo. So Borneo, if you don't know much about that part of the world or that geography, Borneo is basically split. The island is split into two regions. One is, it falls under Indonesia, and then the other falls under Malaysia. And this Hoya is found on the Indonesian side, or the Kalimantan region of Borneo. But again, it's grown a ton. As you can see, I had to trellis it. it came to me, I think it was probably, you know, this is the original stem right here. I don't know if you can see this, but it kind of traverses up this side of the hoop. And I want to say, yeah, so there's where it, like the end of the original stem when I got it. It had some really good solid growth and good roots when I got it too. But you can see here the original vine kind of tapers off there. And then here is the extra, what do you call these? Kind of like the climber vines. When Hoyas are climbing on items or on surfaces, or trellises, trees, whatever, they will oftentimes branch out. Their vines will, seeking purchase. So if they are growing in one particular direction and that's not an ideal direction for the plant, like they're not encountering nutrients or anything, or it's just not a good growing situation, they will branch out, the vines will go elsewhere, and they will continue their pursuit of sunlight and moisture and nutrients. So they're just really cool in that respect. But this one's done that a few times. I'm not particularly certain that they love these bamboo hoops, or maybe they're just a little bit too small for these faster growing Hoyas. I might have to look into a different trellis option for these ones. But overall, I'm thrilled with the growth on this thing. So again, this is Hoya sp. Kalimantan. Next Hoya up is my Hoya callistophylla. This has been a wishlist Hoya for me for a very long time. And I had it once already. This is callistophylla number 2 for me. This is my second try. My first one definitely died. I'm not quite sure what happened. It may have arrived with roots that weren't in the best condition, and it just never rebounded from shipping or the stress of travel, or maybe I just didn't know what I was doing at the time. I don't know. But I've had this one, I want to say, for about the same amount of time as I've had this Kalimantan. So it's been this year. I've had it less than a year. But in that time, you can see it's grown moderately. It's not been kind of an abundance of growth on it. I know these leaves kind of up the trellis here are new. But it has flowered. So I think right now it's in the process of figuring out a new vining situation. But this is an active peduncle. It has flowered multiple times from this peduncle in the last several months. And just a few kind of notes about callistophylla. Obviously, it's prized for its beautiful leaves. It is a plant that is native to Malaysia. And it definitely likes cooler temperatures. So, you know, I mean, any Hoya, Hoyas are tropical plants to begin with, so you don't want to go any, very much cooler than 60 ideally. But I'd say that it does prefer kind of cooler temps, kind of more filtered light, and definitely more humidity this plant will benefit from. So yeah, that is Hoya callistophylla. Big boy. This is my Hoya curtisii. So curtisii, move this out of the way. So Hoya curtisii. I have had this beautiful baby since August 2019. So this is one of my older Hoyas. It has taken advantage of that time, as you can see. When I got it, it looked a lot like this side of the pot. But since I've had it, it's done this. It's freaking fantastic. I love this Hoya so much. And I really have found it quite easy to care for, given the conditions. I might have really lucked out with it because I do hear that this one can be a challenge for some people, and I don't doubt it. I just feel like I really legitimately hit the sweet spot with it, like right away. It loved where I put it, and that was probably by chance. But I just kind of left it there, and that's where it's been, and it's been a delight, and it's grown a lot. I mentioned I have had this plant since August 2019. I've had a second smaller curtisii since November 2020, and that one is doing equally as well. I have them in similar type grow situations in my home. They're in different parts of my home, but similar kind of environments for them. Both of them are growing primarily under grow lights. That's their primary source of light. And they're both in regions of my home quite close to humidifiers. So that extra boost of humidity, I think, does these plants a lot of good. So fun fact about curtisii, where you can find it in the wild, or where it exists in the wild, I should say, because you shouldn't be going to look for these plants in the wild. You should be purchasing them from reputable growers. But it is found across Malaysia, Thailand, and the Philippines. And again, it's growing so well. I can't say enough about this plant. And it looks cool. It's a unique looking Hoya compared to kind of your standard, vining Hoyas. This one's a great hanging plant. And it's just so much fun. It's so much fun to grow. I found this thing trying to attach itself to walls and shelves, and it's just a delight. I love this plant, Hoya curtisii. Next up is my Hoya finlaysonii. This is my long-leafed variety. I do have a shorter leaf variety. This one is definitely the one of the two that is doing the best in terms of growth. This I've also had in my home since April 2021, so spring of this year. And it was a decent-sized plant when it arrived. This is the primary, this is the stem that it had, and I think it had a few leaves on it, but this whole thing, as you can see, has kind of tendrilled around this bamboo hoop. It's produced several leaves in my care, and this one has actually also flowered. This one has bloomed. You can see there's the active peduncle up at the top there. It was a very, very brief bloom, though. I think it only lasted a day or two, but it was still really cool that it bloomed already. I think it speaks to the seller too, that they just really take care of their plants and they send quality plants. But this Hoya is phenomenal. You can see there's already another growth point coming out the base of the main plant here, and got some new growth up here. Very, very cool. This one is found again in Malaysia, in the Penang region, and again it made the list primarily for the leaves and just the amount of growth it has produced in this short time that I've had it in my home. And then, yeah, the fact that it bloomed for me is also pretty cool. So again, Hoya finlaysonii, the long leaf version. This next one on my list, it made the list on its own merit, but also it's kind of a representative of a lot of its siblings or relatives in its particular species. So this is Hoya pubicalyx. This particular variety is the black dragon. As you guys might know, you who collect Hoyas, there are many, many, many varieties of Hoya pubicalyx, and quite a few of them are very, very easy to grow. I would say pubicalyx as a species, as a whole, is probably one of the easiest Hoya species to have for a beginner. If you're new to Hoyas, definitely would recommend pubicalyx. But this one, it's kind of unique in my collection due to the blooms. They are supposedly solid black. I've never seen this thing bloom yet. I'm going to say yet, because it's growing quite well. I've had this in my collection since July 2020, so it's just over a year and a half, right? Yeah, a year and a half. And I would say that some of the Hoyas that I've had bloom for me or were kind of slow and then took off after about a year. So I've had kind of a period of limited growth, and then all of a sudden, after about a year, they'll take off, and then after that, they might start blooming. If they are smaller specimens, which this one was a small specimen when I received it. It has definitely vined out quite a bit. I think I probably had just, like, oh, where's the original vine here? I don't even know where the original vine is, but it did an offshoot vine, and it's just been going nonstop ever since. This is one too that I don't sometimes take the best care of. I have neglected this plant before, and it has continued to just do its thing. It's pretty low maintenance, as most pubicalyx are. Yeah, I'm waiting for this one to bloom. It's also pretty unique because it doesn't have any speckling on its leaves. They're very kind of solid matte and a lighter green than you'll see on some or most other pubicalyx species, or varieties, I should say. So this is just a unique one in my collection that I'm really excited about, and it's easy to grow. It's grown quite a bit since I've had it, and I think the next step is just going to be to try and get this one to bloom for me. So again, Hoya pubicalyx Black Dragon. This one, I should mention too, is native to the Luzon Island of the Philippines. Next Hoya. It's a lot smaller than the varieties I've been showing you, but it does make the list, and let me tell you why. So this is Hoya revolubilis. This particular Hoya is found in China and Vietnam. That's the regions it's native to. I've owned this one since September 2020. So I've had this one for just over a year. And let me tell you something about this Hoya. When I got it, there were 2 leaves on it. This one, and a little dinky stem with barely the nub of a growth point. And it stayed that way for a very long time. Like, this thing was probably, I would consider this one of the slowest starting Hoyas in my collection. It stayed the same forever. But let me tell you something. When it started to grow, And again, this one could be probably in more favorable conditions for it. The light specifically, I could probably have it in higher light, and that would boost the growth quite a bit. It's not in like darkness or anything, but definitely could improve the lighting situation for it. But I mean, it's put out in just a few months here. This entire stem, this growth point, like, went into overdrive, put out this leaf, and then this whole stem where there are definitely active leaf nubs on it. So I'm going to be careful with touching it, but I think it gets the most improved award, honestly, but it's also just a really unique Hoya. Like, the leaves are super thick, just very, very thick and rigid, and it's just really, really kind of an interesting plant. So I'm excited to see what comes out of this stem and how this progresses. This whole growth point too, I should say, this right here, that's all new. So it's definitely still active. It's definitely still doing stuff. So we're just going to have to wait and see with this one. But it made the list because when it started growing, it started growing. So this is, again, Hoya revolubilis. So the next 2 Hoyas, we're going to have to take a field trip because I didn't have the wherewithal or the capacity to be able to move them. So they had to stay where they are, but let's go take a look right now. All right, in my Hoya room, I've got 2 Hoya in here that I couldn't really move. One of them is this lovely Hoya. This is my Hoya linearis. I have owned this one, this linearis, since February 2020. And I say this linearis because this is the second linearis that I have ever owned. The first one shipped from the UK. It was kind of a destroyed mess when I got it. It just really couldn't salvage it. This one was US grown, so spent a lot less time in a shipping, situation in a box, and it just really took off immediately in my possession. So linearis is cool in that it grows at very high altitudes. I believe this is a Himalayan Hoya. So up in the Himalayas it grows. So subsequently it likes cooler night temperatures and quite a bit of humidity. As you can see, I have it right by a humidifier right here. I really, really love this plant. I love the unique look of it. The leaves are really cool, the way it drapes, everything about it. I'm just so happy that I was able to grow one successfully. I'd say it's probably put, I don't know, at least like a foot, maybe a foot and a half on some of these vines since I've had it in my care, which I am ecstatic about. So yeah, Hoya linearis, just a really kind of reliable grower in this condition right here, kind of where I have it at, and I love this one. So there's linearis. Kind of on the other side of the room here, I've got kind of a different situation happening. This is, obviously it's in a cloche, this is my Hoya imbricata. And imbricata is found in Indonesia and the Philippines. And it's a really unique one. I think this one makes a lot of my favorite Hoya lists. Let's see if we can take the lid off here just to kind of give you a sense of what it's doing. I'll try and stay out of the shadows a little bit. But imbricata is just super, super cool. It is symbiotic. It has a symbiotic relationship with ants, and so that's kind of how the leaves form. If they're able to attach to a surface, like the bark of a tree or something, they will grow flat and kind of create this cup or dome shape, and then the ants kind of take shelter underneath those and then supply it with nutrients that way. So that's the symbiosis there. This Hoya I have owned since January 2020, and it absolutely needs humidity. It has grown up in this terrarium. This was like a 2-leafed cutting. So it has lived exclusively in this terrarium, in this glass terrarium I set up for it since I've owned that cutting. I think I even rooted it in here, and then it's just kind of dominated. This is now the only plant in here. I had a couple additional plants rooting in here with it. There's a little bit of like soil and bark where the root ball is, and then the rest of this is sphagnum moss, and then I've got some cork bark in there for it, little T-Rex skull in there. It's just a really, really neat setup, and it's just a really neat plant. Yeah, again, I mean, I know I said I wasn't going to play favorites, but this is definitely up there for me. I love this Hoya. So again, Hoya imbricata. Keep it in a terrarium if you have one. The last 2 Hoyas that I'm going to share with you are definitely Hoyas that fall into the were revived from the brink of death category. So the first one in that category is my Hoya obovata. I love this plant. This is probably, I want to say, one of my older plants that I have in my collection in terms of Hoyas. I got this one early. I got it in July 2019. It looked a little bit differently then than it does now. So it's always been a favorite of mine, but it definitely suffered a bit recently with root rot. I want to say in the fall-ish, I started to notice that leaves were yellowing and things weren't doing very well. No new growth on it for a long time. And so I checked the roots, and yep, they were rotted through. So I took a bunch of cuttings. I couldn't save the main root ball, which is fine. They all rooted really, really quickly, really, really easily, just a few weeks, and then I was able to repot these back up. And as you can see, I've got new growth on these cuttings. So this is basically a plant now again. So Hoya obovata, found in Indonesia and Thailand, known obviously for its big, flat, round leaves. Mine are speckled. These ones came out speckly. And if you put them under bright enough light, those speckles have like a pinkish hue, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I'm pleased that I was able to salvage this one. It seems pretty easy. You know, not all Hoyas root well if you have to take cuttings from them, or they root very slowly. This was super, super fast, and I had a potted plant again. So again, Hoya obovata. Last Hoya I'm going to show you is my Hoya Ngong Ngoy. This species, or I guess, yeah, it is a species, is found in Thailand, and I have owned this plant in some form since September 2019. When I say some form, it's because obviously just like the obovata that I just showed you, I had some revival that needed to happen with this guy. Root rot, definitely, similar situation. You could tell that it wasn't growing well anymore. The leaves were kind of shriveled and flimsy. They weren't really holding their integrity, and there was no new growth happening. Vines were dying off. It just wasn't happy. So a quick root check kind of confirmed that we had a root rot situation. So this particular one, I was able to rehab the main root ball, just cut a bunch of it back, a bunch of the rotting roots. And then I did take several cuttings from this plant, kind of as insurance, but also the vines were so long and I wanted to kind of take the stress off the main root ball just by trimming away some of that extended growth. So those rooted up just fine. The root ball grew new roots just fine, and it's potted back up. This was a recent occurrence, me potting this guy back up. So I'm very, very happy to see it kind of returning to its former glory here. This plant, as I mentioned, is from Thailand, and it really, really benefits from high humidity. When I moved it, you know, I probably had it about a year, and it was growing for me for about a year. It was quick to start growing. But after about a year, it started throwing up peduncles. So I would say, yeah, like a good year after owning it, I started to see flowers on it, and it bloomed for me several times. And that also kind of coincides with me moving it to a higher humidity situation. So it really benefits from high humidity. You'll see it flower more often if you do that for it. And I'm hopeful now for this one. I was able to save it. I haven't really seen this plant offered in very many places from very many sellers. So I was super scared that I was going to lose it. And fortunately, I still have Ngong Ngoy in my collection. So again, just an awesome plant. Super, super happy that it is recovering and seems to be doing pretty well. All right, everybody, that is it from me. Thank you for watching my top 10 Hoyas of 2021. And thank you so much again for subscribing, checking out my content. I love that you're here. We're going to have fun. Come on for the ride. Check out my other videos if you want. But thank you so, so much for finding me in this corner of YouTube. I love the plant community, and I'm really happy you're here. So until next time, everybody, enjoy your plants.